Right. So, welcome again. Uh, One of the reasons I'm extremely excited about this particular webinar is part of it is that I've heard so much from my father, who's also here, about Prakhar and his work. I've been witnessing bits and pieces from friends who were part of who've participated in various things that he's done. And then there's this special hook which is about the spirit of nonviolence in social change, or the idea of dreams in social change, and why that's important. I think that somehow just spoke to me so much because I like dreaming, and I believe that many of us in the NVC world, especially, are trying to bring some sort of NVC elements, at least to the social change work, and we often get stuck. So I thought this would be a really fantastic way for us to learn. So Prakhar is, in addition to being amazingly willing to be here and support us with this work, he's also, I mean, we're so grateful to have you. It's such a genuine pleasure. And In addition to that genuine pleasure, he's also extremely experienced with this work. He has co-founded two organizations. Is Youth Alliance, and the other is the Indian School of Democracy, which is a non-partisan political. Um, well, I don't know, it's a political organization, but it deals with non-partisan politics, which is fantastic. And to me, it really talks about actually living a middle path, which I believe is really pertinent to everything that's going on in the world now. Um, he has also many other things, but I'll let him talk to you about that. So that's all from me. Really excited, and over to you, Prakhar.
Thank you so much, Mansi, and everyone else who is over here, especially Sir. Uh, so I don't have a lot of, I think, like wisdom to share. What I can share briefly is like experiences, and then maybe if there are comments and thoughts that you all also have, so you can also pitch in, and we can try to make it as interactive as possible, rather than me speaking and just talking one way. Uh, I will give like a much like share in 10 minutes a brief background of where how I've arrived here, what has happened. Yeah, so I'll briefly share about my background so that the context is there. And I think it also comes from a belief that I think what we are today is, I think, of like the past whatever years we have lived. And I also believe in like the lineage and I think generations that make us what we are today. It is not just me who have done this. I think there's a lot of people collectively who has made me reach here. So I come from a decent city in North India called Kanpur, and the year which I was born, my family migrated from the village to the city. So among the four siblings, I was the one who was sent to an English medium school. The other three went to a government school in India. And government school in India, I hope most of us have context, is a very different ball game to even get a good education over there. So my first existential question, which I hold today, is why did they send me to an English medium good private school in Kanpur and not my other three siblings? And that's why this background is very important for me because that often I think every time when I see the privilege I've got because I speak in English and my other three siblings can't, I think it makes me question why did they make that choice in 1991 to send me to an English medium school. So I don't have the answers yet, but that's what I think is an important part of the story. From where I think my journey shifted, I made friends which were very different who came from different socio-economic background. And then on one side was my village, wherein there's a different diversity. Like my own cousins and I still like a security guard and working at like $100 per month salary. Most of my uh, extended family cousins are at that level in the financial structure. So I've seen that very closely, and I still see that very closely when I go back to my hometown or my village. So that's one part of the life that I think is still alive within me. And the question that I'm holding from there is why did they send me to a good private English medium school that changed my trajectory in certain way? While I was in my college, this whole divide was very alive. The rural India and the urban India are very different ball games. And from there, I think this whole thought started: Can I do something? Can I take young people to rural India to make them see what are the realities of our country, and then make them choose what their career path should be, rather than just doing. I'm an electrical engineer, so after doing engineering, the natural progression is to do an MBA, and then after MBA, natural progression is to either go into consulting or do something similar which earns more money. And for me, I think it was an assembly line, and I still remember the problem statement for me while I was in my college was that how do we break this that like education system which has become like a factory system? How do we break this model of factory system and let young people in their early 20s get to see multiple realities of our country, and then let them decide what they want to do rather than putting the blinkers like an horse and less making them walk a certain direction? Is there a possibility of making them see what is the reality? I think the I think one belief that I hold very deeply in my heart is that we all have innate goodness. It is just that over the years of experiences, I think that goodness goes deep inside our heart and it is being covered by different kind of experiences, which lets us away from what we fundamentally want in our life. So how can we scratch those layers and make us connect to my own heart and what do I really want? I think that will shift the trajectory. So I started Youth Alliance 2011 and started working with young people with always a small group of people, like not more than 30-35 people in one cohort. Because again, the second belief is that it is humanly impossible to do work which has depth with a scale of like 100, 200, or 500 people. It's very difficult unless we have enough facilitators who understand that language, that journey.
So,
So,
Prakhar,
yeah, yeah.
interrupting you, there's a request in the chat. Could you speak a little louder? And maybe from me, a request if you could speak a little slower so that everybody, even as like people who are not from India, can also follow you with ease,
Okay.
if that's possible.
Sorry.
Thanks. No,
Yeah,
that's fine.
I think Hindi comes more naturally, but I know that there are a couple of people who don't understand Hindi, so I'm trying to be a little more balanced. So I'll be a little more slower. Uh, so I think the other question for like the other thing was for me was that how can young people I was sharing get to see multiple realities of India before deciding what they're going to do for the next 40 years, and I think that gave birth to Youth Alliance with a very simple motto that let us take young people to different multiple realities of India, especially rural parts, taking them to uh, like a urban waste. We used to call it landfill pilgrimages. But the idea was to go to a landfill and see what are we creating. How do we start questioning the basic idea that at some level humans are reduced to consumers? Can we start questioning those ideas? Humans are much more than consumers. So those things began, and I think while in this process, one thing which became more and more clear to me was that somewhere deep inside, no matter what I do, until and unless we don't engage with the with some paradigm shifts in the world, in the country, I think a lot of it will not change so easily. So politics became like a obvious thing that can we engage with politicians, because there were hardly any politician that I can look up to and say, okay, this is the person who looks like my role model. And I think in my especially 90s and 2000s, people have gone in school. They would never say that a public servant is a role model. Often the role models would come from a corporate world, which is fine, or a sports world, or uh, Bollywood or entertainment world, but not from public service spaces. Like if you go to a class ninth and ask students over there, who's your role model? They will rarely call out a name of their local politician or their national politician. Often, I think we as Indians went back to role models in the independence era, people who fought for the country. But in the last 3-4 decades, we hardly see anyone as a role model. And I think that became a big question for me. Can we have role models for our generation? I think one thing which is becoming more and more clearer that every generation has to have its own role models, and we can't rely on the past always. So, who are the people who are going to lead this generation? So, I think with that thought, we started engaging with politics, and 3 years back, me and my co-founder Himakshi, we began this journey of Indian School of Democracy with the core idea of how can we have principled politicians in our country. So here we are. Uh, it is exciting, and I don't. I think every other day I think that I get paid for something which is teaching me so much. So it doesn't seem like a job to me, and I think luckily I've been lucky for the past 11 years. I've never felt there are days and phases maybe, but not in a long phase of 3 months that I felt that I'm doing a job. And for sure, there are days when I feel, why am I doing this? Why am I even engaging with this? But overall, I think it's been a good journey of enjoying and learning a lot. And I think Mukul sir and Mukul is also here. I have my engagements on Facebook with people completely on the opposite side, and that's been an interesting learning curve for me to put myself out there and be vulnerable and learn how do I say my thing in an extreme polite and respectful way. We'll talk more about it. We have thought about that. So yeah, Mansi, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm wanting to open. This is going to always be an interactive session. Um, and I'm wanting to just capture that there's some pieces that I heard you say that I found very relevant to at least the questions I have walking into this session. One of the pieces I heard you talk about was vulnerability. I heard you talk about leadership and what that means. I heard you speak about acquainting oneself with different realities and the value of that. And I heard you say very clearly that you love what you do. So I have some questions around that. And I'd really like, love we both, I think, are in resonance about this to have this be interactive amongst us. So maybe if everyone can also think about the questions you would like answered, not just from this session, but maybe in when you think of value driven social change or you think about any of these things that Prakhar is talking about, what comes up for you? You can raise your hand and you can put those questions in the chat. Um, so as to start us off, I have my what really drew me in right now towards the end was about um, loving what you do and letting that define your path. And I'm wondering if you could say a bit more about that.
Yeah. So so I often feel that I've never explored too many things. So while I was in college, I don't know, I was like pretty young, early 20s, and I decided to work with the young people who were like nearly my age, and I never tried a plan B. So sometimes I feel, Mansi, that I don't know if I would have tried something else, maybe I would have been doing that, but I never tried something else. I started doing this just after college. I did 2 years of Teach for India fellowship. In that also, I was very clear that I want to work with young people only eventually. So something that I've been very clear that I don't want to work in a space in which I don't know the people I'm working with. So I think that's been one fundamental thing for me. I don't want to work with a team in which I don't know my team members. So I think it's for me. I think the numbers became very important. I don't want to work with like a. I don't want to run a leadership program. Essentially, I've been running leadership programs both in Youth Alliance also and now in IS Indian School of Democracy also, in which I don't know the people I'm working with. So I don't want it to be a factory which is manufacturing people. And I think that exactly was the problem statement for me, that universities have become factories that are manufacturing product to seek success, status, and money, and eventually they become the part of the larger problem. That was the problem that I felt, and that was a statement that I wrote down for Youth Alliance long back, and I still very dearly hold to that. That it is not that we don't have skilled people in our world. There are many, and like there are great institutions, IITs, IIMs, Harvard, Columbia, so many other XLRI, and we are getting great people out of these colleges every year. I think there are thousands of graduates who are coming out, but the challenge is that are we connecting these individuals with their passion? Because I think once we marry these individuals who are extremely brilliant with their core, what is in their heart, I think something beautiful will come out. And I think that's been my one big thing. So coming back to the question, for me, I think one defining thought was that I want to work with a smaller group of people, and that's why maybe I would love my work much more because I could have an eye or a window into what's happening. I can be present to the people around me. I think that is one important thing for me. Can I be present? I don't want to become too busy in my life that I'm not present to the people I'm working with, and that's why I think. That's been one thing. Second, I think, which is I think more important now as I'm like growing a little older with my gray hairs, is that essentially I have to work on myself. And I think more and more that clarity is coming in my heart that it is, I think organizations and team members, everything is a limitation. I have to fundamentally work on my own self. And until and unless I don't have a light shining in my heart, nothing outside will change. Or the entire external change is a manifestation of internal change. So I think that clarity is becoming more and more clear to me. Sir has, I think, a question, or he has raised a hand or a comment maybe.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I had asked this question to you a couple of times. You never got a complete clear answer. Uh, when you started Youth Alliance, and you mentioned that during the Teach for India fellowship, you were clear that you would like to work for youth. But there must have been a trigger event. I mean, that's a hypothesis which I have. That some point of time you actually decided that this is what I will do. This, and started the Gramya Manthan and Youth Alliance and all those programs. So what was that specific event, trigger point, which drove you towards that? Because why I'm asking is it's an important question for us to understand, because that's, I mean, many of us have this idea that we'll do something, but there is some precipitating event which triggers that. So if you can answer that.
Sir, I still don't think that I have a one specific event. I think it was a phase in which I was going. And so I prepared for like getting to IITs, and I did not get through because I was never that good in academics. Or maybe I don't want to call myself that I was not sharp and intelligent. I was sharp and intelligent, but maybe other things of the word, not the standard exam that happens. So I was not sharp in those things. Like I can't sit down and like for me, reading a book is a difficult thing today also. But I can sit with maybe Madhukar sir to understand a lot what he might have written in the book. So I never cleared that engineering exam to get through a good engineering college. And I think in India, if you don't clear IITs or NITs, that kind of college, you are labeled in a certain way. Uh, I was a loner at some level. I never had a lot of people around me, sir, to talk to share what I deeply feel inside my heart. And I remember outside my school, in the primary school from grade 1 to grade 4, there was a slum right outside the school. And the kids over there would never go to school, but they would sit right across over there before when I walked into the school at 7 a.m. or when I came out at 2 p.m. They would always be playing outside. And so that's the first place I went to after passing class 12th. I went there back to those homes, spent some time, and so maybe that was one seed that was planted somewhere. And second, like I said, my cousins, like my first cousin, still are like ATM guards and that. So I see that there's a huge difference within my family itself. I see what my parents made a choice. My father was class 12th pass and my mother class 5th pass. So it's not that I came from a very different background. I could still relate when I see my cousin being married off with a 5 lakh rupees dowry. So I still see what's happening, what is the reality back home, and that pressure has also come on me to change the financial dynamics of the family. But I don't know from where that courage came. But sir, all those things put together made me decide while I was in my college that I don't want to go that path of just getting into job and doing that. And one I think belief that came, this is extremely personal that I'm sharing, is that I was very arrogant in my college. I'm still arrogant in many ways, but I was very arrogant when I was in my college in my first year, and I got to know in my early first year of college that I can mobilize people. And if there's a fight in my hostel, I was in like a maybe C hostel, everyone would come to me. कि लड़ाई हो गई, we have to go there. And I could see that it is very easy for me to convince people for a certain thing. And a lot of them were not so good. But my group had the dean room's keys where the exam paper were kept in the first year of my college. And somewhere those things also told ki I have the ability to mobilize people. A lot of things I did in my first year I regret, and it was all like I don't know from where that arrogance, that ego was very strong in the head. And then what I felt, especially when my wife, we met in college first year, and somewhere we started talking, and then she would tell me feedback of what image I have in the girls' hostel. That was one thing. And then I knew that a lot of people in my hostel would avoid me because they know that such a brash kind of person. So I think that was one part of it. I was like captain of my cricket team in first year without even knowing how to hold a bat. So that became like a very key turning point for me when I realized that I have the ability to mobilize people. So in second year, I literally went very in isolation. In third year, I started reading about Mahatma Gandhi, and I had a complete disbelief, which is not possible. And I think in final year, again, I think after like around 18, 19 months or maybe 18 months of complete isolation, I resurfaced in college in a very different mode. And then I think 2008 was the time when I started Youth Alliance during my summer break after third year of engineering, before the final year. And it took a lot of time. I think a lot of people had complete disbelief that even I'm doing this genuinely. So, but I knew that that's a consequence of what I've done in the first year of college, that I have to face that flag. Today also, I think in the initial years of Teach for India Youth Alliance, a lot of people used to say ki all this is drama, all this Gandhi and all is a drama that he's putting it. There must be some game that he's planning. And I think accept that part of them because that's what they saw. Matlab, it's very difficult to see that a person can change. And that's why my belief in young people that they can shift became very strong because I have also gone through that for myself. So my fundamental belief today also is that any person, if given right ecosystem, right environment, can go through a transformation. So yeah, so the long answer, but maybe there was series of events that led to this. Yeah.
So I mean, a related question from there only, that you mentioned that given the right ecosystem and right support, and I assume that when you started Youth Alliance, you were not earning and you didn't have any money,
Yes, sir.
right? And obviously, you would have required some money. You would require some
Yeah.
support, and especially as you were saying, people didn't believe, and normally people don't believe. So, what was that supporting ecosystem, which helped? And how did you build that ecosystem? And I'm saying, how did you find people who would support you?
Yeah.
Because that's a challenge which many youngsters have.
Yeah. So one big thing which has helped me is that my personal life was very simple. Like my hardly expenses in 2011, 12, 13 till 14. So 11 to 14, like for 3.5, 4 years, I was completely like living in office, using office internet, and my personal expenses would not be more than like 80 to $100 per month. So I think that helped me a lot to not compromise on many things that I believed in. And then I think I started writing very early on, like during my college only. I think I started writing by the fact that by the time I was in my final year, I started writing like letters to my friend. And in Teach for India, I started writing every other month. I used to write what am I feeling, what am I experiencing, what's happening in the classroom with some people. And I think that started building a cohort of people who were supportive. And I think I still regularly write to people. It's been, I think, now 12, 13 years, but I still write to some people. Now I think sometimes it takes forms of a newsletter of the organization or a personal letter as well. So that helped. And then I think there were different mediums. So like I was in Teach for India, so Shaheen, who started Teach for India, became a very close mentor, and she still is a close mentor. Then I went to Jagriti Yatra. Over there, I went with a very clear idea of to understand how do young people think, whether this idea will work or not. And then met Anshu Bhaiya over there, who is the founder of Goons. He became very close, and now we're like we are not just mentor mentee. We are also like a sukh dukha partner on multiple things. And like every other day, I think every week we would talk mostly. Now also after like 10 years of it. Uh, So that way I've been very lucky to have the people around me. And I think one thing which I think Mansi has shared about the word vulnerability, I've never shied away from sharing what I feel deep inside. It might be very against the person that I'm talking to, but I don't know how, but I learned that way to very respectfully disagree with the other person or put my point very respectfully. At least I think it is respectfully, so you can share whether I'm always respectful or not. But sometimes I do lose that. But yeah, so that has helped me build very strong relationships. Like some of my relationships are 30-year-old, like from class first. Shifali is a friend from class first, and a lot of them were earning. She was in Deloitte, so she would put some money, and then some friends from Teach for India would put some money. But fundamentally, I think what helped was that my personal needs were extremely limited, and my life was, I think, where was I'm saying, because today I think me and my wife both yesterday were talking how do we simplify our life again. But I think that time, yeah, I had that very strong courage. I have to do this no matter what, and I want to lead a very simple, frugal life. So yeah, that helped. And I never shied in asking money. I have asked money, sir, from you also. I remember way back from 2012 onwards. So I've always asked money because I fundamentally believe that it is not for me; it is for the cause that I'm representing. So I've never shied away from asking money. So, Madhukar sir is our annual supporter for the past, I think, 9 or 10 years. So yeah.
That's a
He's also a monthly supporter for me. So that's, yeah. I want to draw on a couple of the points you're making around leadership, because I see that there's some resonance in that for the question about leadership and what that means in the chat. Um, I'm I'm hearing you track a few qualities. One of the qualities I heard you track is talk about is reflection, the capacity to take feedback and reflect and be with that. I heard you talk about really learning a clarity of your purpose and the fact that it's not for you, but it's for something more than you. And something about the capacity to change alongside a vulnerability and rigorous honesty. And these are qualities that I can imagine are sometimes innate and sometimes they can be built. And I would guess leadership is something more. And I guess this is maybe my moment to hook in and ask you about, because when we were talking yesterday, you mentioned something about leading with love, and I am wondering if you can talk a bit more about what that means for you in your experience, especially as you're working with people who might lead in the future. Um, One piece of that question is around how do your personal experiences shape how you see leadership, and the other piece is how do you see leadership in the first place, and what does leading with love really mean?
So 2 days back, I was in Sevagram, which is a ashram that Gandhiji made. That was Gandhiji's second home in India after Sabarmati Ashram, and he lived there from 1936 to 1948. Most part of that time, when he was not traveling, he was in Sevagram. I was attending a program called Ahimsa Ke Raaste, on the path of non-violence. Uh, so a lot of thoughts. I've been among those thoughts for the past, I think, week or 10 days. And then there was this session that I was conducting with the Teach for India on leadership with love. And we did an exercise in which we gave the word leadership and asked people to tell what are the three words that come to you. And then we gave a word love. What are the three words that come to you? Surprisingly, there was so much common between the two words that people interpreted. Compassion was in both, trust was in both, uh, togetherness or something like that. There were three, four words which are common in both. And for me also, I've never seen it that way. So during that session, I think one thing which I learned was that how people see leadership and love as such an interconnected
Kwa
world.
mbele kidogo ni
But
kama unaenda west.
hello.
Yeah, carry on. Carry on.
Go on. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying for me also it was very interesting to see that how people see leadership and love as very similar. The words that they chose for love and for leadership were very similar: trust, compassion, listening. And for me, I think fundamental to leadership is listening. And someone, I don't know, somewhere I read that listening is an act of love and listening is an act of leadership. So until and unless I'm not listening to the people I'm working with, um, for me, I think I don't think so that I'm equipped to be a leader of that organization if I'm not listening to the team, to the people I want to work with. And as a process, what happens is that in most organizations, and sir, I will share with you also, I'm writing something mostly for IDR around how do we build organism and not organizations with like a machine. So this difference between organism and a machine kind of an organization, there's a huge difference. And to build an organism, it's like a baby which takes a lot of time to grow. You have to invest a lot of time. And sometimes in the rush of the skill and so many other things, we don't pause to build our team members. So how do we take a pause to build our teams? And also because I have worked for maybe 12 years, but someone who has joined my team this year has experience of 1 year only. So I'm at a different level when I'm thinking about Sarvodaya or when I'm thinking about Swaraj. But my team member is not at that same level. So we have to curate experience for the entire team to understand the vocabulary that I'm going through. So I've spent a lot of time in Sabarmati Ashram, in Sevagram, but it is my responsibility to also take my team, take a pause of 5, 7 days every 6 months, and make them experience what I feel as a co-founder of the organization, what Sarvodaya means to them. Because words won't do justice unless they go and see people living that. And there are spaces in our country wherein they can see that, and it will be different for different organizations. So for me, when I talk about leadership with love, uh, first core thing is internally within the organization, are we operating from the space of love? Are we operating from a space wherein listening is there? And love doesn't mean that our excellence will go down. Love doesn't mean that we will not ask difficult questions from the team members. It doesn't mean that I will not give feedback to my team member. I will do all that, but then there'll be a caring hand also whether to support them. And if it requires slowing down, so we will slow down. And I think it was Buddha's quote. He said somewhere, or I read somewhere, essential is invisible to the eye, and only when we have to see the invisible, we have to slow down. Without slowing down, I think it is very difficult to look within. So I think that's what I think has been on my heart for the last 2 months. Also, how do I slow down in my organization to see whether we all are connected to the same why? Otherwise, it will be very difficult to build an organization which talks about Sarvodaya or Swaraj, because the meanings of this word can be very different. So that's been there. One experiment that I'm doing for myself at least is, can I do some physical labor every single day? Because without like harmony between head, heart, hand, I won't know what's happening deep inside me. And this whole pedagogy of head, heart, hand, I think a lot of people have written. I got it from Gandhiji, and in which he talks about there must be an harmony between what I'm thinking inside my head and what my heart is feeling and what my hands are doing. And for that harmony, we have to see, because as our generation, we are becoming more and more very head heavy people, always in front of laptop, always intellectualizing things, always thinking solution of like 3 ways. So how do I consciously take a pause every single day, maybe for an hour, to do something which is connected to my heart, or more important to my hands? So I think that's been one quest for me over last, I think, 5, 6 months. Now more so, more rigorous. What can I do on a daily basis, or can I like choose a day in a week wherein 4 hours of a day I'm doing something with the hands, especially in a city life. Like once I'm in a village or in those setting, it is possible, but in a city life, it becomes a little difficult thing. So yeah, I think it's a quest I'm on. This is the first group that I'm sharing this, uh, because I think this group will understand this part of it.
I really appreciate your connecting leadership with listening. And I love that you do it in this space because very often, one of those things that NVC people, at least, and when we do this work, we get very enmeshed in the empathy and the listening. And sometimes it becomes this cuddly little bubble. And we don't have that confidence to know that I mean, this is my assessment that confidence to know that it matters in social realities is so that it does matter is important. I see that Clara has a question, and Clara, would you like to switch on your
Switch
mic?
on your mic.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. So, hi, Prakar. I'm sorry I was a bit late, so I'm sorry if my question was already answered in your first words. I just wanted to know how many people you had in your organization at that moment, now.
So just
So
now,
just now,
at
at
Indian School of
Institute of
Democracy, we are
Democracy,
a
we are
team of around 10 people. As a philosophy, I don't want to operate in an organization with a team of more than maybe 20, maximum 25. So we'll be mostly 15 to 18 by the end of this year. But we don't want to grow beyond maybe 25 is like the upper threshold for me. Because I think I also have my own limitation. I've understood that this is how I can operate best. So I don't want to run after like making a team of 100 people and scaling it to so much. The idea for me is for of scale to offset the numbers in the team is how do we prepare more people who can do similar kind of work. So like I can see from Youth Alliance, there are people who are doing very similar work in very many different parts of the country. And I think that's scale for me. If they come, they learn over here, they go there, and then we handhold them. So that's I think the idea for me to keep the depth intact. Yeah, I'm also
Thank you.
exploring this paradigm, Clara, uh, where to find that fine balance. Yeah.
Yes, the reason why I was asking this was when I heard you talk about the choice you were consciously making of sparing time to connect with your team members, to make sure that they are still, aligned with your values, or at least the way you understand things. And I was wondering if you were planning to expand, how easy this would still be to find this time to keep doing that, because I think I read recently about the story that happened many years ago about Oxfam discovering that there were some members of the organization who were just committing abuses on people, and the leader of the organization, when she was interrogated or asked a question about were you aware of this and etc., and what she said was, well, the organization is still going to continue because what we do is very important and very relevant for a lot of people, and those people who were committing this abuse were just not connected with our values. So that's why when I heard you talk about, I'm absolutely focused and intentional about raising, keeping this alignment. Yeah, I wondered how possible this is when you have a big organization. So yeah, thank you.
So,
And
Prakar, how do you select your team members?
um,
What do you look for in team members?
can I
So
ask?
sometimes,
Sorry,
yeah.
could I ask you to answer one question before you do that, because I think it ties up with Clara's question. If that's okay for you, Baba.
Yeah,
Okay. So the question was about, because I think that's a really good segue into the question of scaling and what scaling really means. Because I heard you talk about presence. I think that's what Clara's talking about as well, and why. Because there is such a pressure, especially in the social space, to scale somewhere in some way. What is your scaling strategy? And often that, I think you also mentioned this yesterday, that it becomes like a numbers game. So that's one thread of the question that I'm picking up from Clara, and then I'd love to hear your answer to Baba's question also.
Thank you. Uh, so I don't know. I see scale at two levels. One is that when we are doing behavior change work, I'm yet to figure out an organization that has scaled tremendously in the initial years, who is doing like a behavior change work, which is more innate to the heart. In a country like India, I have no doubt that scale is important. Scale is a must when it comes to technical inputs that we are giving. And technical inputs like if you have to ensure that the food reaches the hungry, or if the infrastructure problem is there, the water problem is there, those things must be scaled. And I think it's a sorry state that we have not reached there after like 75 years, 70 plus years of independence. But when it comes to behavior change, I think that can either happen through education at a scale level, which will take maybe two generations. So our education policy changes somewhere, wherein things are not as mechanical as they are today, and that might over next 30, 40 years bring about a change. quickly, at least I don't have any understanding. The examples that I look up to which inspire me, one is Vipassana. Vipassana is a meditation technique which does like a 10-day silence meditation. Hansi, can you write the name in the chat so that people, if they want to uh, learn more about it, read more about it? So Vipassana uh, is a not exactly Buddhist, but Buddhist meditation technique, and they started their first center, I think, in 70s or sometime. And for the first 21 years, there was just one center for Vipassana. And after that, today, I think it is in more than 100 countries across the world, and I think there are more than 25, 30 centers in India alone. I think it's in, I think there are more than, I think, 7, 8 centers in US, every country, nearly every other country, popular country, there's a Vipassana center. But for the first 21 years, they just did one center, one program every month. So I think that's been one big inspiration for me. And the other thing is that a couple of people, I think all the spiritual gurus, if we see like the real spiritual ones, they never they always, like Gandhi used to say, give me 100 non-violence practitioner. He never said that give me 1 lakh people I want to work with to change. And I think I see that I'm yet to reach to a level of Gandhi or a Buddha, who at the end of the day were asking for 100 people only. And sometimes we talk about behavior change and non-violence, and we want to work with 1 lakh people. So sometimes it sounds a little funny to me also, but I think the difficulty is in navigating funders, and I think that becomes a huge challenge sometimes. To how do I present my case to a funder wherein per participant cost will become too high because you're working with a very smaller number of people and you're not scaling, and that's been a huge challenge. I think not here, but at least in Youth Alliance, that was a big challenge for us. Like half the time, I was just justifying that I work, like we do 4 programs, we work with some 120 people in a year, so the per participant cost will become a little higher. And I think that was a huge challenge. But I think what has happened is that over the years, people have seen the work. Our alumni have been working across the country at a different level in different organization, and I think that has helped us. Like our alumni work with like a Bezwada Wilson who runs Safai Karmchari Andolan, who's like doing amazing work. They work with Aruna Roy, they work with P. Sainath. So so very different choices they have made. They have one couple of them are living in Sevagram. They've left, and one of them has done PhD in like Dalit rights, and she's living in Sevagram. And there are many stories like that, and I think that has given us a lot of credibility in this space, because now our alumni, sometimes my alumni introduces me to someone, and I think that's a very powerful thing to happen. So that's been there. Now I think in today's time with the work of Indian School of Democracy, uh, challenges happen at multiple level. One, because it is political work, so a lot of people don't want to put their name with us, and a lot of people have committed funding and then gone back because elected MP, MLAs come in our program as facilitators, and people come from across party lines. So that becomes a different challenge. But I think because of the, like, 10, 12 years of journey, and then Himakshi is also a strong person, I think we've been able to raise and convince people that this work will happen in this way only. And there were moments when we got offered to do something at a scale which was like very different. It's not that that's a bad thing to do, it's just it doesn't align with my heart. And we have said no. We've said time and again no. We've said no to funding in ISG also. Someone wanted us to open Indian School of Democracy, like the institution within a private university. We said no to them, and they were ready to fund like end to end everything for 5 years. But we said no to them. So those choices we have to make. That it will be a little tricky, difficult, but can I stick to those things that's there? So for the team member, I think one thing that I think my belief at least is that intention is more important. Competence can be built. So for some roles, we see how the person is, whether there is basic value alignment in the team or not. If basic value alignment is not there, then it will be very difficult. Like when we do our team gatherings, we travel by a sleeper class only wherever we are going. Our most programs happen at a very frugal place. not like a very luxurious place. So those kind of things, like Abhi, the Good Politician, the program begins from 14th August. So as a practice, the entire team will stay and live in the similar thing for at least 7 days before the cohort comes in. And our days start at 5:30 a.m. in the morning. They offer any program with the morning meditation, then Shramdan. So we have to see that value alignment, basic value alignment is there. So we share these things during the recruitment process only, and then see. So I think value alignment is very important in the work we are doing. Otherwise, it will be tricky to then sustain in the team.
I think that ties up with Kim Seo's question. I saw Sandeep's hand as well. But Kim Seo's question was, how do you keep your team to still have a strong commitment towards working towards a shared vision and minimizing a conflict of interest?
Thanks, Mansi, for translating. Yeah. Uh, so I think conflict does happen, and sometimes I think it takes too long to resolve a conflict. But sometimes just sitting together and talking about it, I think gives a lot of depth in the team. So yeah, I think it does happen. But I think what is happening is that it is a common, like we all have our own vision, but if there's common understanding of the larger vision, like someone in the team will be excited about women who want to go into politics. There are some people in the team who are extremely passionate about Dalits entering politics. So how do we see that the overall there's some part of my personal vision which is aligned with the organization vision? I think that is enough to sail through, and then basic value matches there or not. Uh, if there's too much conflict and if the basic value system match is not there, then I think people do part ways. I think it has happened in ISD that people have left the organization, have gone. Uh, but the whole idea is when they're leaving, are they leaving with a good experience of the organization? So that I think we try to take care of that part. But otherwise, I think conflict do happen, and I think that will happen. People will work together, so we can't do anything about it. We can just minimize one during recruitment. Second is just by conversation and having an honest dialogue.
I'm also hearing it's not about the dialogue is not about resolving the conflict, but about the dialogue itself. It's about um, like conflict is natural, but it's not that it has to be fixed, but that there needs to be a space to talk it through. Is it something like that?
Also, we don't have to make people everyone alike. That whole idea is a very flawed idea in my head. That I don't want to convince everyone to agree to me. The idea of dialogue for me at least is to listen what I'm saying and listen what the other person is saying, and then see whatever the natural conclusion is. Often, uh, like the debates that the GDs and all good discussion that used to happen in college at the time was the whole idea was to convince the other person that no, my truth is truth, everything else is wrong. And I think that's a very flawed idea from where we operate when it comes to dialogue. I think the whole thing is that okay, this is your truth, this is my truth, and both truth can be right. Can we reach to that space first, and then think of something else? So yeah, at least for me, that's what dialogue is. I don't want to convince other person to agree to me every time. Sometimes I do because of the role in the team, especially within the team. Yeah, there's always a conflict that we call it Indian School of Democracy, but then there are some things which are not that democratic. Uh, yeah, sounds wrong,
What does that
but
mean? Yeah, that was really no. It doesn't sound wrong. It sounds interesting. What does that mean? And I know Sandeep, you're holding your question. Just
uh, so I don't know. The quote, it says it very well. I don't know if I clicked the photo in Sevagram. There was a quote around freedom and discipline. So a lot of people don't want to get up at 5:30 in the morning to do morning meditation. They want the day to start at 7 a.m. Abhi, I think for me, surrender is a very important value. So some things you have to surrender when you are part of the team. Abhi, who decides that? It's a very tricky thing. Uh, so I think that thing, it seems like I can also see in the team members that they also feel that they don't want to get up at 5:30 in the morning. to do a morning circle. So over there, I think democracy takes a hit. But I also don't know what is the other way. One thing is to do like sit together, have a consensus, and there are very few examples wherein things happen through consensus. Meghalaya is one example near Gadchiroli where things are happening through consensus, but very few. But I think at least what uh, I think there's a difference between freedom and surrendering when it is needed. So how do we do that? And for me, how it has worked is that if we trust the person, if we win the trust of the other person, I think they are ready to jump with you. If they don't even know what's down there, how deep the fall will be, they will jump with you if they trust in if they have a basic fundamental trust in the person. So for me, that's the way, uh, which can be a little undemocratic. Like you are winning through love, but yeah, that's a dilemma that I also often am in. I also don't know the answer. But I think as I'm also growing old, I'm also becoming less strict. 10 years back, I was very hardcore. You have to get up at 5:30 in the morning. The session has to start at 5:30 in the morning. But I think 10 years of doing this, I think I have shifted to 6 a.m. I get up, I start my silence and everything, but the team and all come a little late. So I'm seeing that shift. Uh, but yeah, Dil Mein, though, I think I also still wanted. I now wanted to start at 5 a.m. But I see that if the collective is not ready, then we can't force these things on it. They're already making a huge choice of coming at like 6 a.m. So yeah, so that's a little undemocratic part.
Actually, the last piece of what you said, that I'm, the collective needs to, there are also collective needs, sounds like there's also you living that quality of surrender and letting go of some pieces and letting that value guide you. That's what touched me about that. Sandeep, you had a question. Would you like to ask?
Prakhar, you just mentioned that, while you have to convince people and for doing so you influence. And then while I heard your first part of the discussion where we saw that you came from the rural India and had been the chosen one to be part of an English medium school. So somehow I relate to that because I have a similar background. But I have a question that, when we have seen both parts of the India and both parts of the cultures together, in this age of marketing, it is equally important to to glamorize a thing to convince someone, and specifically that part from from where you want the volunteers to come out. Now, in doing so, I wanted to understand your minimizing your expenses and uh, going the Gandhian way. How difficult was it, or how easy to choose between the two parts, the Gandhian way or the marketing way? How was it?
Yeah. So I was not knowing Sandeep at that time that that's a Gandhian way. I think I was more convinced by the idea of simple living, and I'm still more convinced. I think I've failed at multiple levels over the past few years, but I'm still convinced that that's what will address a lot of problem in the world also, like leading a simple life. Like there is a quote someone said, "The earth is enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed." So, and it comes from a very strong philosophy, which can be, which a lot of people don't like when I say it very honestly. So I avoid saying it, but it comes from the fundamental idea of capitalism, which has made humans into consumer. And when humans are reduced to consumer, you don't see them as innately unique individuals. You see them as like a uniform bodies moving around, and then you paint them with new things, and you keep giving them new things to use, so that they don't get in touch with your own self. The good thing about I think my upbringing was that so when I was doing my engineering in Ghaziabad, and a lot of my friends would book their tickets when they will go home from like Delhi to Kanpur. And I remember once I also booked my ticket, and my father would say, "What is the need to book a ticket for 400 kilometers journey? Why don't you sit in general and come?" And I would remember a lot of my friends, and I did not take it as a bad thing, but I would say that was the upbringing. So I was never spoiled in any ways in terms of in using so like my first Maggie I would have eaten after class 12. First time I sat in a train was to come to my college. Uh, First time we went as a family to a hotel was When I was in my college and when we were returning from our village, I stopped everyone, let's eat outside today. So it was like when I was 20-year-old, and then first time I went to a hotel with a family, as a family. So it was very easy for me to like be in that. So I don't have to give up a lot. So I think a lot of respect I have for people who make a choice of letting go of their privilege and doing something. I was to never like that very privileged that way. And I'm privileged in multiple ways. Like I'm a Hindu upper caste person, male. So all those privileges are there. That's enough in a country like India. So I'm aware of that privilege, but financial privilege was not there. So I do respect those who let go of that privilege as well and then do this. And I'm sure for them it will be very difficult. Who have led a certain life, like who have lived in like an AC room from the age of maybe 5, 7, 8 year old. For them to make this choice will be much more difficult for rather than for me, who never had an AC or like who never tasted that luxury. So I think for me it was not a huge transition. So I would not try to portray that it was a huge sacrifice for me. I think it was a routine life. I was brought up like that, and that's why it was easy for me to live that life. The good thing was that I never went into that race. Like my all my friends now own a house. All of them have kids now. So those were little tricky things. To decide that I don't want to buy a house. To decide that I don't want to have kids. So those were more tricky and difficult things, and then to convince the family that I've made a choice. Both of us together have made a choice. It's not that we can't afford a house. It's not that I can't get a highly paying job. I can get that, but it's a choice that we are making, that we don't want to do these things and we don't want to go that direction. So yeah, this was the question. Did I answer your question partly or?
Yes, Prakash. That is what I actually making a choice between the two and keeping a balance in both spheres is a difficult task, and that is where I wanted to understand how did you manage to sail through. And I certainly have a lot of unanswered questions answered today. Thank you.
I want to also check with you, Prakhar. Are you okay to answer a few more questions? And shall we
Yeah,
get
we
back
can
to
do. I think this is. Yeah, we can do.
yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, because we have the time from 5 to 7, but I also never realized that when we were doing this, to be authentic, I didn't never fully conceptualize that you'd be answering questions almost like on a like in this role in this kind of way.
We
So I want
can
so
we
if
can
you
also listen some people what are they thinking, Mansi, and just
yeah, I
listen
was
to
also
them.
wondering if there could be a pause at some moment for reflection and what's coming up for
Yeah.
people and to hear that as well. I do have one more question. I have 15 questions, but I do have one question that's alive. My father seems to have a
Baba has a question.
few more.
Yeah.
And I maybe let's take about Baba. I just want to check with other people who haven't asked questions yet. If anybody has, maybe we could take a couple more questions and then step into reflection. And otherwise, we have a bank of questions, but wanting to hear from people who are on mute um, and who haven't spoken yet. Okay. So I'm gonna ask my father to ask. I keep forgetting. I don't know how to refer to him in these spaces, but yes, Baba, please go ahead.
I love that you called him Baba. I think very few people do that when they are in public spaces,
Well,
and I
once I
just
called him
loved it.
Dr. Madhukar Shukla. That was very bizarre. It was very, it's very
Uh,
strange. But yes, go ahead.
No, I had a question about your current venture, that the Institute of Democracy, Indian Institute of
yes,
Democracy.
sir.
Because essentially it is about creating leaders who will create social change. So, what is the what do you call it, the template or model or the idea of that those leaders is in your mind? What kind of leaders you are trying to create? That was one question. The second question was where you started that why did your parents send you to a private English medium school? If you found that.
So your voice was breaking when I started. Why did I find the answer to that question? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that was the when you started that. Why did you get the privilege of among you all your siblings to be sent to a English medium private English medium school? But that's a different thing. But more important question is about the Indian School of Democracy. What kind of leader? What is the concept of social change behind that?
Yeah. In general, in our program, we are focusing on three things in Indian School of Democracy. One, I think, again, at the center is inner transformation, that the person needs to first become more reflective, become more inclusive, and also know the consequences of her action that she's taking. That's there. Second, I think, which I've learned, I think, in the last 3 years, which maybe that my belief has shifted from Youth Alliance to ISD, is that just being a good person is not enough. I think it is important to be a good person, but also you need to be skilled, especially when you are entering an arena like politics. The skills are a must, and that will take you to a much further way. So, second focus that we do on the people who are coming in the program, giving them the right skills, maybe understanding of constitution, how to run a frugal campaign, or how to build a public narrative or a social media, or understanding identity politics, tribal politics, those things. So that becomes the third is how do we have a strong sense of community that you are not alone in this. There are other people also who are working alongside, and it's a shared vision that we are seeing for the country, and it is not a solo journey because these journeys are extremely difficult. The people who are coming in our program in the good politician, out of the 42 or 44 people who are joining, around 70% comes from marginalized communities, be it economically or be it religion or caste. So sometimes I feel that I am unequipped to even hold a journey like that, and that's why it is important that the community takes ownership of the collective learning rather than ISD becoming the center and teaching them. What kind of, I think, leadership that we want? I think the whole idea is around Sarvodaya. How do we, and Gandhi's Talisman is one thing which has been a guiding thing. I will just read for those who don't know Gandhi's Talisman. Uh, but the essential idea of his talisman is that how do I be aware of what action am I taking and what is the impact of my action on the last person in the line, like the most marginalized, most excluded, financially, socially, economically, politically. So I think that's the idea around the leadership that we are talking about. Uh, People who are coming in public life not for the self-interest, but they're coming in public life with the interest of the last person in their constituency. So that's the essential idea. But the whole idea is to see. Hello, yeah. So I'll just take one more. The whole idea is to see leadership in different forms of capital. So there are 6 capital that we talk about. One is moral capital, which is more around what are my value system, how am I living them, and that kind of it. Briefly, I'll share. On the website, you guys can find more about this. Second is intellectual capital. What is my ability to comprehend difficult ideas? So maybe if there's a case around CA and RC happening, if Kashmir is an ongoing issue, or if farmers' agitation is an ongoing issue, do I understand this? What is the nuance between it? Where is it stuck? Or simple tribal rights things. What are the ideas around that? So that's intellectual capital, my own ability to see multiple truths that are existing within one thing. Third is social capital, which becomes a central pillar for us. Is do I have a strong connection with the people in my constituency? So we are imagining leaders who will have a very strong mass base in there. So if you're intervening at a sarpanch or a municipal council level, the first thing is that in the first 3 years, they build a very strong connect with at least 400 to 500 families in that constituencies, if it has that many families. So that's the idea of social capital. That have I tangibly impacted life of a family? That's there. Then I think next is network capital. Do I have the ability to mobilize like maybe a CSR or the media organization that I'm continuously sending press releases of the work I'm doing? Because in today's time, it is important to send the signal outside that you are doing something. You can't do in a silo and think that politically will be a viable option. So are you smart enough that while you're doing your political work, you're also engaging media in that, and if possible, CSRs and on those things, that's network capital. And then there is political capital, which is more around do I have connection within the party? Because in today's time, you must have godfather, godmothers in the parties because that helps. So while you do all the good work, you also have your own connections within the political party. And I think in that, ISG helps a lot in introducing them to the right people within the political party. And for that, we have been able to build our connection across party lines. I spend a lot of time meeting people. So yeah, so I think that's what we are looking like 6 forms of capital in the people who are coming, but with a very fundamental idea of they working towards Sarvodaya, they working towards the last person. It is difficult, so we don't know how much we will able to achieve. But the idea is to keep reinforcing it and also enabling them to think from that lens. So that's where we are, and a lot of focus is on selection. So our selection process, and Madhukar sir was part of the selection process also. It's like they apply online, then they go through a video interview, and then there's a 2-day residential process that happens before they're finally invited in the cohort. And the idea of residential process again is to see the person who they are, because that becomes very critical. So that's there. So for the question about why I was sent to English medium school, I don't know the answer. And
Okay.
maybe all this quest is to just justify the privilege. And I genuinely feel that a lot of us must think about what am I doing of the privilege that I hold.
Yeah.
And
There was Mansi, sorry, I think you had some.
I was just reflecting on how interesting it is that I can now blame you for how many questions I asked, genetically speaking. But please, but
No,
I
I just wanted one more clarification from Prakhar. Because you mentioned about issues, especially for ISD interns and other candidates, issues like the farmers' protest or NRC or CAA. These are pretty contentious issues, and the opinions are polarized.
yeah.
So even in the cohort, you would be finding people who have very diametrically opposite uh,
Yeah.
opinions and conclusions about that. So how is that resolved? How does one say that this is right?
Yeah. So again, the idea is not to resolve it in the program. The idea is to enable them to hold their thoughts. So like when we did our first program, Democracy Express, it was happening in December 2019, which was at the peak of the protest here in RC, which was happening in Delhi and everywhere. And we were doing this session around some mental models. And there was a documentary that we were showing around lynching. And there were people in the cohort who were from BJP, who were from Congress, different like left and right, all the spectrum. And one person started crying that I can't even imagine beef as a eating thing. So we have to hold a conversation with the person that and for the others also who consume beef, for them to see that there is a person in the cohort who thinks that way. So the whole idea is to not convert, but can we enable the conversation between the two extremes? Because that's what is completely missing. People are not even talking today, and that's why I think we fundamentally chose to be non-partisan. For that, there are people who don't who say that if you become anti-Modi, then only will come to our program. If you become anti-Congress, like speakers or faculty, and these are very prominent names, like they're very famous uh, kind of politicians with whom I've spent time, and they have said on the face, Prakhar, you have to make it anti-Modi, or you stop calling Congress people, then only I will come to the program. And I've seen this aversion more in people who are against BJP than in BJP. And that's a very, I think, tricky thing to see. That the BJP never, I think most of the time BJP politicians never say that you don't invite Congress, you don't invite Aam Aadmi Party. But people from the other spectrum often say that, why are you inviting BJP? So I think that we are seeing. But we have made our choice that it is important for people to talk, especially young ones who are entering politics, because it is 40% vote share. We can't ignore that. Uh,
So your idea of democracy is people having conversations, irrespective of their where they are on the spectrum.
Sir, idea of democracy is not exactly that, but the idea that if something has to be resolved, it will happen through dialogue. Without listening, it will not happen. Because what is happening now is that the ones who call themselves like liberals and the ones who call themselves on the maybe right wing, they both use the same dialogue. They both use the same language. No one is like having. So the tools you were opposing, if I'm from a left liberal side, what I was opposing is exactly what I am using to oppose that. And I think that won't work. Somewhere the language has to change. Somewhere the methodology has to change. It's like how in theory of oppressed, the oppressed one, once they become like the head, they again use the same language that the oppressor was using. And that's what is happening in our public discourse. That same language is being used. So somewhere, I don't know, it's a difficult thing, but I'm like very inspired by the work of Truth and Reconciliation of Mandela and Desmond Tutu. So let's see. Sir, we will
Thank,
walk someday. Maybe it's 10 years down the line, we will walk across the country together for this work. Yeah.
thanks.
So I know, Sandeep, you have another question, and I would like to pause on this for a moment and invite all of you into breakout rooms for maybe 10 minutes so that maybe others also have questions, reflections, and whatever's coming up. So you have about, it's not a very long breakout room, it's just to kind of give you space to digest what came up, what's been shared. There's a lot that I notice I have a lot of questions coming up also and reflections. So I'd really like to make space for that. And it would be 10 minutes. And once you come back, I think it'd be lovely to hear from all of you about just how this touches you, what comes up for you, what are the questions you're carrying. I wanting to just name that Prakhar, a lot of the things you're saying are paradoxical, and that the center of that paradox is where the path is, and it's a complex balance sometimes. And I think that's an important. These are important. Like if you have doubts and questions and misgivings and stuff, it's important to name them. So it's 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And when you come back, you can share in English or in Hindi. Can't translate from another language, but we'll translate across those languages, so it's fine.
Just one thing I want to share as we go in the. So a lot of it, and a lot of people call me also too romantic in ideas, but I think I'm 36 only, and I want to keep this romantic alive within me, because some many times I hear a lot of people saying that this is not possible, this is not possible. But maybe, and yeah, the whole quest is to try it out for next 10 years. If it will not be possible, I'll be just 45 maybe. So I'll do something else after that. But I don't want to give up because it is too romantic an idea. So you can ignore it if it is too fairy tale kind of stuff.
All right. I just all right. I'm going to open the rooms. I want to just say that if you're 36, you can't call yourself very old because you're only 2 years older than me. That's not allowed. So, but on that note, I'm opening the rooms.
This meeting is being recorded.
Clara, you joining from where? Which city?
Once you are on mute,
Oddly enough, I was going to tell Clara that she's on mute.
I wasn't sure. Sorry. I wasn't. Okay, so sorry. Can I ask you to repeat? I'm so sorry.
I think there was a question about which city you're joining in from. Where are you?
Oh, yes. Okay, yes. So I'm based in London. I'm joining from London. I'm French, but I'm in London at the moment. So far from India. Unfortunately.
I think me, Mukul, and Mansi know about Clara, where she's from.
Yeah. So there are 5 countries on this call. There are 5 countries represented in this one space. It's a small but very rich group. So I guess Prakhar, with your permission, I think we'll invite sharings and maybe everybody could share a little bit. That would be really sweet to hear. Um, and I want to begin with whoever has the energy to begin, who feels ready to pop and go with that. And maybe you could actually tell us where you are based because it would be sweet to know, sweet to hear about that as well. So, and if no one volunteers, I'll call somebody's name. Okay. So, Sandeep, you're unmuted. Taka, you were
Yeah,
unmuted.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, please
I
go
was
ahead.
just waiting so that I don't look like over enthusiastic because I've been asking questions. Uh, so Mansi, I am actually now based out in Jamshedpur, and we belong to UP, but then we have been based out in Jamshedpur for quite a long time now. I am actually surprised. I wanted to tell you, I was just sharing in the break room that yesterday just happened to see a pop-up coming from Madhukar sir that about this session today. And I thought it'll be too interesting to see how somebody from the Indian School of Democracy, brings in ideas about things going around and changing it in the social sphere. And when I came in here, I was able to relate myself with Prakhar and understand how he has been doing things and influencing people around the Gandhian way. Because I have lived a journey where I have seen the entire digital evolution. Luckily, because I was very closely working with telecoms and all. So in the last 1 decade, the entire transformation which has taken place, to pause out and to understand what has gone by, was it something which I wanted to do, or was it something where a shift is required? I think this is a wonderful platform, and I am going to be here forever so that I have all those unanswered questions getting answered. And the most surprising thing was, before I could formulate a question, Madhukar sir had already put it on the table. So it was kind of a spark that, how it works together, the entire ecosystem when it comes of brainstorming. So thank you. I really enjoyed the session. And Prakhar, there's a lot more questions which I may come up to you whenever I need your help. Thank you.
Please unmute yourself and go next. Whoever wants to go next.
I'd like to ask something. So in the breakout room, there was a question that came up, and I thought I'll ask that. So when Prakhar, you were talking about the team, um, I have experienced this, that when you have people, let's say, working in your organization and they're from the community, they have, or they're raised with certain ideologies or certain values that they follow. But when they come into the organization, uh, there are certain values that your organization follows, and it is expected from them to also sort of align themselves uh, to the values of the organization, so that you all move into the same direction. But a lot of time, it happens that people have this inner conflict of whether to follow these values that we've been raised with, or whether to follow this something new but also feels interesting and makes sense. So if you have also experienced something in the team and just want to know how people, or in your team, or how do people reconcile with this, because I see there's no one answer to this. um, so just want to hear your thoughts.
Mansi, you want me to share now or later?
I was actually going to ask you that. What do you feel like doing?
Anything works, yeah. I can hold on to it also, yeah.
The two of us will never make a decision. Um, Maybe now is better because I didn't fully track your question. And after this one, what I'll do is I'll write the questions down so that we can come back to them at the end of the sharing. So
Okay. Uh, so that, yeah, sometimes probably conflict is there. It's not that conflict is not there, and also especially when the team comes from a very diverse background. So everyone has a very different value system. And one thing which has, like, there were three, four things that I thought I will talk in the session. One was how do you negotiate between conflicting values, and that does happen when the team grows. Beyond three, four people also, when the team grows, there's always a conflict between values, and how do we negotiate. So I think that's a good dance that keeps happening. Uh, Sometime it get resolved. If it is too big a conflict, then I think what the journey has to end for someone. And often I think over here, in a more practical sense, if the conflict is with the foundational value of the organization, I think then the journey ends with the person who is joined in the midway. And that has happened at ISD, that has happened at Youth Alliance also. Uh, at least my effort in, in that entire process, that the experience of the person who is leaving also remains good. That doesn't get diluted. Uh, and when I say negotiation between conflicting values, uh, it's more of like, at least I have clarity as of now today for myself. It might change later. Is that between truth and love, I will choose love. Truth is not that important to me. Love is very important to me. Uh, and that doesn't mean that I am a liar. It's just that if I have to prioritize between the two things, I will choose love. I will choose compassion. And often they might be one only. But if I, and as a simple example, if I have to give feedback to a person and I see the person is not ready, so for me it's violence. So I will choose love for the person rather than choosing truth. Because if I know that the person is not ready and I still say that you have not made the document in the right way, or some, or any feedback that the deadline was 3 days back, it is still not there. And if I see the context of the person and the person is not ready to receive that, then that's a big conflict for me. And uh, at least I feel that I'm yet to learn in my journey, that if the person is not ready to receive that, and if I still give him that thing or give her that thing, it is violence on the person. So now in that case, I will choose care and love for that person rather than being so truthful. So I think those things happen, and then there are team members for whom truth is very important. Love becomes second. So then how do we negotiate feedback culture in the organization? This is like a very live example that I'm sharing, and very confidential example. Because if you keep love, then sometimes efficiency takes a hit. If you keep truth, then the experience of the person in the organization takes a hit. So somewhere in the middle, you have to negotiate between the two. So yeah, so and the whole idea of I'm brutally honest, I fundamentally think about what is more important to me. Is brutally more important to me, or honesty more important to me? So that happens, and in that case, it becomes a tricky situation sometimes. Uh, so sometimes choosing silence is also a good thing until the storm settles. But those things do happen, especially when we are operating not from a lens of right and wrong, not from a lens of conclusion, but more from a lens of emergence. So these are real challenges that come. I think every month, once or twice, this will happen, and then there's a huge struggle. What is the right way to go about it? Uh, I'm a very intuitive and perceptive person, so I so rely on my intuition. Uh, but yeah, one challenge which I'm facing is that intuition can't be the language of the organization. Especially the moment we go to the standardization of things, intuition can't be the language. Like for when I take a session, and so I usually don't have a session plan for a session. I have basic, some structure, some flow. I will not go walk in a session with minute to minute planning. But then no one else can do that session unless they co-facilitate with me 3 times. So now that's a conflicting values within the organization. For some people, it is important to have a 3 page, 5 page document ready. 3 o'clock we will do this, 3 5 we will do this, 3 7 we will do this. We will ask these 3 questions. and I see value in that also. But for my personality, I think it will kill my spontaneity if I go with that method and walk in a system. So there's some middle path. I'll write some things, and then someone who's observing will write some things, and then we maybe come up with a session document. Uh, so yeah, so those are the negotiation that we do constantly within the organization. I also get to learn a lot, but sometimes it's hard on me also to like sit down and make a 3-page session document before the session, which doesn't come naturally to me. And I get feedback that you can pull it off spontaneously in the session, but not everyone can do that in the team. So I value that feedback also. But agar someone is not even ready to write a session document, and then I think that becomes a huge conflict. And after a point, those things just aggravate. Yeah. I don't know if I answered the question, Sapnil, but yeah, that's
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that helps. Thanks for sharing that.
But I think we all must do this exercise in our organization around what are my top values, and if the values will conflict, what will I choose? Just to get a sense of that values can be integrity and some value can be in conflict. So what will I choose in that point? Because uh, that's a very important thing to do for an organization. To how do we take decisions within the teams? Yeah.
Okay. Who'd like to go next? And see the richness of the response. And I'm wanting to balance hearing all voices and having these responses. So I guess Prakhar, I want to ask you again. Do you have a sense that it's easier to do it one at a time? If there are questions.
We can try both. I think one at a time. I can be if I'm like a shorter in my response, then it will work better. If
No,
I'm
well,
too long, you can stop me.
no, the length is where the richness is. So it's not that I want you to be shorter at all. Um, okay, let's just go with it. Who'd like to go next? We'll figure it.
I'll go. It's just a reflection hearing what you are saying, Prakhar, and also the question from others or the response from others. This is what I say also in the breakout room, that like social change. And I'm glad when you mentioned about, or Manasi mentioned about the Swaraj, because I think individual change is also the basic of social change. Like what comes into my head, like even if I can't, I mean, I know the challenge of changing myself, and then when it comes to social, then that's what you just said about like how am I going to relate with others? How am I going to respect what others value in their life? But what's in my heart is like this could be a long process if this is a saying that we heard a lot. If I can't change, then how would we expect others to change? I'm pausing on that because I'm reflecting on that, looking especially when we work with the youth, like how challenging life right now for youth, no matter where they are, like their social environment or their economical environment, but being in between, and it's like lost, like what am I going to do next? What am I going to be? So, and I'm happy also when at the beginning you're saying that you take the youth to places first and then see and then decide what they would love to do. It gives motivation and also intention of choosing the next path. So Yeah, I'm pausing there. Thank you.
Would like to go next?
I think I go next. So I think it's I just try to relate one point. Since I'm working with kind of with the government project in kind of trying to not really change but improve the health systems. We provide management leadership training to kind of health centers manager and hospital managers. I don't really have the background in health, but some background on management and leadership project. And now I'm working with a team. We provide this kind of training, mentoring, something like that. And I think it's just try to internally reflect to myself. So I think to me, it's a bit difficult to manage a teams, not even consider on an organization, to have a shared value and to maintain the values of our work in resulting the community. For example, in resulting a better health of, to improve a better health of community peoples. That's the last product we want to get. But how to manage our team to fulfill our roles and avoiding the conflict of interest, it's quite difficult for me. And it's not really happen, but I'm trying to kind of seeing the teams, and it's a bit, to me, it's a bit curious, kind of, I kind of take steps a bit slowly in doing decision, in putting some action, because like I'm a bit new to work with the team, to manage the team, and I'm trying to avoid some kind of conflict, especially the conflict of interest. And internally for me, it's a bit difficult because in living in a competitive world, and yeah, so it's a bit difficult not to manage ourselves, as what you said earlier, like the world is enough for the people's need, not the greed, but there's some greed inside us to manage ourselves and to manage other. It's difficult for me in this point. And I think perhaps if you can share a bit more aside from what you shared earlier, how to maintain the teams working together with this value, with their personal bridging to the organizational value is also quite important. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim said. I think one thing we all must acknowledge that we all are work in progress. None of us have reached somewhere. It's a work in progress. So we will make mistakes. That's a given. And the other thing that I think has helped me, at least, and one of our mentors once shared this quote, was that there is no there. Everything is here and now. So this whole aspiration of one day I will reach there, I'll become there, I think sometimes puts too much pressure on us. So just acknowledging that this is what is the reality of today and this much I can do today. I think that might, at least for me, that works. And the other thing that has worked for me is that trying to lead by example constantly, like within the team. So like very simple things. Just trying to live it before I say it to the team members. So if it is like morning meditation, so I will make sure that like if my program starts on 15th August, Good Politician, for I think at least 3 months before that, I will make sure that I don't miss. At least I do 6 or 7 days every week my morning meditation and exercise, so that I have more conviction in what I'm saying. So I think that becomes, at least for me, that becomes very important to lead by example, and not just go there and talk about practices, daily practices, rituals without living them. So I think people see through us. So the moment we say something which we are not living, people know that. People know that, especially our team members who know us so closely, know the reality of our. So over there, I think big conflict happens when they say that, okay, the benchmark is different for the team leader and the benchmark is different for the team members. So maybe that's one way. For me, for sure, it is help. It can be different because your context is different. So it must be a little different for you. But you have to figure out what is it that works for your team. The other thing I think which for me I think also works is that I don't come from a thought, school of thought of work-life balance. I come from a school of thought that there is one life and there is harmony in one life. There must be harmony in that one life. So thinking that I will do something else in my work life and I will do something else in my personal life doesn't work for me. And because for me the constant quest is to be the same person from 9 to 6 and from 6 to 9 in the morning, helps me in multiple ways to bring that harmony in my life. So I have to like the person who comes to our house help, I will in my consciousness treat her exactly same as I treat the team member in my office. She will sit with me and every day have breakfast with me on the same table, like I will have. The person who comes to pick up our garbage, I'll make sure every once in a while we sit together and have a cup of tea or coffee together. I must. That's a basic fundamental thing for me, because otherwise, what I'm saying and what I'm doing in my personal life, uh, yeah. So I think, and I think my team members understand that. So I see that shift happens to them, and I will never go and say to the team member, "You also do this." But just by seeing and listening, I see the shift happens within the team. And there are other people I learn from, like Himakshi in my team is very high on rigor when it comes to health and all. And I've been inspired by him. I think it's been now 3-4 months that my food patterns have changed. I've been very consciously eating in a certain way, and I see difference in my energy. So I think we all are inspiration for each other, but leading by example becomes the crux of matter for me. And then harmony between personal and professional life, whatever, if there's a difference for some people, then how do I harmonize the two? Yeah. Uh, yeah, I think there's no easy answer for these things. I think it is contextual. I'm just sharing what has helped me, and because it has helped me, then I tell a story in my head. Okay, this is working for me, so I start doing it more. It's like a cyclical thing. One day, this story might tell me all the like for the past 12 years I was living in an illusion. Leading by example doesn't work, so I'm ready for that. It might happen, but as of now, it helps me a lot. Yeah. And I learned this when I was a teacher for grade 3 as a Teach for India fellow. I think that's where I learned the importance of leading by example, because kids imitate you. Like as a teacher, kids are complete reflection of their teacher and their parents. So if I will not come on time to school, if it is like say 7 a.m. in the morning, I have to be there by 6:45 maximum, because after 6 months just seeing the classroom, you can tell how the teacher would be. You send me in any classroom where a teacher has been consistent, like one class teacher for maybe 1 year, I can tell about the teacher also, and anyone can tell, because it's a very direct consequence of what the behavior of teacher that the kids behave in a certain way. So I learned it in my Teach for India time, that leading by example or practicing what I'm preaching is has to be the foundation of my leadership style in life. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to share or ask a question? Um, I'm also tracking time. We have about 6 minutes on what we
Yeah.
had committed to doing.
Yeah.
And I want to just make sure that if somebody does have a question, we address it and that we capture the reflections in the chat, if nothing else. So please go ahead. And whoever would like to go next, I think we could do one more question before we have to close.
Yeah.
Or one more reflection.
Yeah.
Please pause for one moment, Baba. I'd love to be sure that somebody who hasn't spoken yet also asks their questions.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll wait for 10 seconds to be sure. And now I want, yeah, I thought we had an idea about one question I could ask also, but Baba, you can go ahead, I think. Yeah.
No, mine was not a question. Mine was just a reflection of my takeaway. So one takeaway, which is, I mean, in intuitive way, one knows, that social change starts from self. But I think what more came out, especially when I asked about the ISD approach to leadership. First, I mean, one part is the inner transformation that one becomes more aware and one, looks at one's own values and becomes much more transparent, etc., etc. But taking it to social transformation is something more, which is about what he, getting the right skills, knowing about the sector, understanding tools and techniques, so to say, of dealing with that sector, and more importantly, the power of the community who have an ecosystem supporting system. I think that was one major takeaway. So thanks, Prakhar, for that. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. And Prakhar, I'll ask you just to close. We have about 4 to 5 minutes. I mean, I can go longer. I don't know about everyone else, but I'd love to ask you to talk about the magic of this work. This is what we were touching on when everybody was in the breakout spaces. And you spoke about magic, and I would love to end on that note. So, would you be willing to share what you were saying?
Thank you. So we were like in the breakout room. We were in our little breakout room. I went to drink some water also in the meantime. So I think one thing which I am realizing that why this is important also, and this lifestyle is also important, and which I want to work more on is, and I was sharing with Mansi, I think being a saint in a cave is relatively easier task. It's not that it is completely easy, but becoming a saint and living in mountains in a cave in a lonely life or working with 20 kids is also important. But in today's time, what we need is living like a little more simplified life amid the chaos, because that's what is completely missing. We don't get our role models around in our neighborhood when the entire chaotic life is going on. And I think that is something which is extremely like important for me as of now. And I think from that only, the magic that at least I have witnessed over the last 10, 12 years is that I think people appear from just nowhere. You don't even know from where it appears. And the harsh reality maybe of this work and this kind of thing is that people notice you when you are a little more successful, and then they don't often see that 10, 12 years. So like someone asked me ki Gandhi can do this because, but no one saw that Gandhi when came to India, when he set up Sevagram Ashram, it was 45 years into service, and then he set up Sevagram Ashram. So if he's being able to do something in 1936, there's a history of 45 years of struggle to reach here. And I think 2011, 12, like a 5,000 rupees was a difficult thing for me to raise. The entire month I would raise 5,000 rupees, and it would be such a challenge to. I would write like 100 emails, and like 2 or 3 people would respond. And last month this happened that someone responded to our newsletter and committed to give us 10 lakh rupees. And they got on a call to tell us that we want to give you money. And like 10 lakh is an amount, but I think sir in this group has closely seen my journey, and I feel extremely privileged now with the kind of network that I have. And I think that has happened by every single day over the last 12 years. And there's been so many magic. I think especially in the last 2 years, I've seen so many people just appearing out of nowhere and supporting us financially, giving us time. Uh, so I think that is something extremely important. And the best part of it is that I have at least 8, 10 people around me in my life who fundamentally believe in what I believe in and who are always there. And I think that is the real magic of doing this work, that I have a couple of my mentors who fundamentally are with us. And what more do I want than like 5 people who I can walk this journey with, be it mentors, be it my peers. So I think that's something which happens, and I think that only strengthens the belief. Like talking to Mansi and listening to her, like gives me assurance that there's one more person who's thinking alike. There's one more person who's walking this uh, kind of tough road, but I would say at least I now don't see it as a sacrificial thing. I'm doing this because I enjoy doing this, and I don't want to be in that mode of sacrifice. Yeah, I'm doing this for the word and all. I'm doing this because I enjoy it. It will have a repercussion in the word also, and a positive repercussion maybe. So it has some impact, ripple effect. But I think that's what is there. And like sir is going to take the jump, the net will appear, and या मतलब होता है मैजिक तो जादू तो होता है yeah. And I say this, I think I can feel goosebumps in my body because there's so many moments that are coming alive for me.
Yeah,
Great.
it's the world's most beautiful conspiracy, right? Like that when you're living from a space of deep connection with your heart, then things just emerge and they happen. I found this to be incredibly true even in these workshops. Sometimes everything you shared today is exactly what I needed to learn about something that's actually actively alive. And in little ways and big ways, the universe will give me a sign in some way. I'm seeing some
And it
appreciation.
makes us fearless.
Sorry.
Something it makes us fearless. So I genuinely don't find difficulty in saying my truth to any person. I might not say because I might not see the other person. That's also like the readiness. But I don't hesitate in saying what I believe in. Uh, Yeah, so I think at multiple level it has just made me so fearless that it gives me a lot of hope and courage. So you would have seen our recent interactions on Facebook with her. Yeah.
Now you're
So
on mute, Baba.
No, in the interactions where there have been disagreement, but I think I mean, I found you handling it very beautifully. I'm handling is a wrong term, but moving through those contradictions while maintaining the respect of the views of the other person, that was beautiful. I've seen those, yeah.
yeah. Thank you everyone for I don't know, it's been 2 hours 3 minutes that we have been talking. I have been talking more so, but I think it is rarely that I get on a group and to talk about these things. Often people ask strategy and those things, but I think the meat of the affair is in what we were talking today. So thank you so much for listening. And some of you haven't spoken, Mukulji, and some other people, Nishi, if I'm pronouncing it right. But thank you for silently being here and listening. Yeah.
There's
Thank
a
you.
lot of deep appreciation in the chat that I'll also forward to you, Prakhar. And for me, Living Bridges is about that. All of you are repeat offenders. Most of you are repeat offenders here on this call right now. You've come before. So you are in a group of people who are looking at exactly this. How do we live this together? And I'm incredibly inspired by this. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all of you for being here. And thank you, Baba, for asking
Thank
all the
you.
questions.
Thanks, Prafar. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank
Nice
you,
meeting
Professor.
many
Thank
of
you.
you.
Thank you, Mansi.
Thank you, Madhukar sir.